I actually wanted to tell you this story because Grok actually told me that we should do a show together. So the reason why I wanted to really get you on, other than the fact that, I appreciate everything you do, is because I asked Grok, would it make sense for us to do a show? You being much more of an macro guy and me being much more of a chartist, and he said yes. So I'm super happy to have you on. One of the things I want to start with is you said vocally for a long, long time, and you've been called names and all that there is going to be a cycle top happening around October, right. Q4. And you've been saying when it was approaching and you've seen the chart and you've seen that the 50-week moving average is being broken and tested, you've been very vocal about the fact. Why was this 50-week simple moving average, why was this your leading horse, and was there anything else to this that made you say this is the market top?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the ROI from the low for Bitcoin, this cycle, this purple line here, it topped basically when the other two cycles topped in terms of the ROI from the low. We topped on day 1062. The cycle before that was 1059, and the cycle before that was 1068 days. So I feel like just in terms of a timing perspective, it made sense for Bitcoin to top in the fourth quarter of the post-halving year. That's when it always tops. And then what normally happens is you get confirmation of the top when Bitcoin then drops below the 50-week moving average, right? So basically after every major top, whether you go look at, say, like 2013 or 2017 or 2021, basically it plays out like that. The top occurs, Bitcoin drops below the 50-week. After going to the 50, it then goes to the 100, right? So he goes 50, 100, 50, 100, 50, 100, and then the same thing this time, right? 50, 100. And then normally the inevitable outcome is that it then at least goes to the 200-week moving average, right? So like it just seems like the most likely outcome is for Bitcoin to, and it honestly looks like it's maybe even happening while we're doing this video, that Bitcoin is potentially breaking down here already from that 100-week moving average. So yeah, I mean, my guess is that Bitcoin is likely headed down to at least the 200-week moving average. That's what seems like it makes the most amount of sense. The only thing is that, like, in many ways, this time has not been different, right? Like, it's been the exact same thing that we've always had. The only way that it has been different is that Bitcoin topped on apathy rather than euphoria, right? So we track the social risk, and we're looking at like followers to various Twitter accounts and layer ones and exchanges and YouTube video, like YouTube followers or followers to various crypto channels on YouTube and views to those channels. And what you'll notice is that the 2025 top occurred while retail was basically non-existent, right? Like not a lot of retail interest in the space. This was more of an institutional driven cycle. Whereas if you look at 2021 and 2017, there was a lot of euphoria. So if you color code the price of Bitcoin by social interest, you'll see that we topped on apathy rather than euphoria like 2021 and 2017. And that is the reason there's been no rotation into altcoins, is because there's just no one here to buy them, essentially. So what I've been doing is I think it's prudent to look at the ROI from the peak and just say, like, what if this time's not different? What if it's like all the other bear markets and we're just kind of following the prior bear markets, right? Like that's one of the base cases, is right. Like just a normal bear market. If it's not broke, don't fix it. The other thing is to recognize that, hey, we did top on apathy rather than euphoria. And the only other time in history that occurred was in 2019, right? Like in 2019. And there's some similarities between this top and the 2019 top. In 2019, there was also no rotation into altcoins. Also, if you look at the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve, or not even just the Federal Reserve, if you look at the central bank balance sheet of multiple central banks, so we're looking at, actually, let's look at global net liquidity because it adds it up. We're looking at the balance sheet of the Fed, the Bank of Japan, China, the Bank of England, and the ECB, and we're subtracting out the reverse repo and the TGA. When you do that, you get this orange line, right? So a lot of people are looking over at M2, whereas I think this is the more important chart. And what it shows you is that global net liquidity has only started to go up recently. This reminds me of what happened in that 2019 top, where it had started to go up, but it was enough for stocks to stay bullish, but it was not enough for Bitcoin to stay bullish, right? And so when you compare the current downturn to, say, the 2019 bear market, you look at Bitcoin, you can see it's actually been tracking that a lot closer, right? Slightly lower lows, slightly lower highs. The reason I think Bitcoin hasn't had as massive of a drop just yet is because we didn't have a euphoric top, right? We didn't have every retail investor FOMOing in at the top like we did in 2017 and 2021. And so when you don't have a lot of retail investors FOMOing in at the top, there's not as much selling pressure, right? It doesn't mean we won't eventually have lower prices. I think we will. It just takes a little bit longer to get there. So I think those are the two ways you look at it. Either way, whether you want to look at it through the lens of the 4-year cycle or whether you want to look at it through the lens of monetary policy, it just seems like we're most likely in a bear market. And then the last thing to remember here is that when Bitcoin topped in 2019, it also topped 2 months before the Federal Reserve started to expand their balance sheet, right? So Bitcoin topped in June. The balance sheet started to go up a couple months later. This time, Bitcoin topped in October. The balance sheet started to go up a couple months later. So it's kind of interesting because it topped in a very different way, but then the 4-year cycle ends up being correct anyways.
We'll see. We'll see. I want to circle back and also see what 2026 brings. You mentioned this. So for me, what was very interesting, I will bring my chart up, is that everything, what I usually stand for is, I really like your approach of looking at everything all at once and making decisions based off of that. But this thing was visible on the charts as well. And you brought up 2019. I can also say that 2021 was very similar on a simple break below. So the chart as well, you could see this.
Right.
Without mixing all that. So the reason why I actually said in October that this is the end and basically capitulated is because it was visible in the charts. You actually mentioned the 200-week SMA and you said 60-70K, we'll see where Bitcoin might bottom out. But what is more interesting for me, especially now, looking at this 200 daily SMA, which you said we might actually go back and touch. Now, again, if I look at the chart, I can say we could see a rally here. This is what I would have been expecting. A little bit of a push, which very much actually aligns with your 200 daily SMA. The question is, do you think that is actually happening? Is that actually coming? Or you think that's already done for and we're not going to have a push before we actually reach 60, 70 and then bottom out?
That's a good question. I mean, I'm not as good about predicting short-term trades, to be completely honest. I think it's certainly possible that we rally back up there. I mean, you can see in plenty of the prior cycles, if you look at last cycle, we rallied up to that 200-day moving average. That didn't happen until March last cycle. And I mean, it seems like this cycle, everything's been happening about 1 month sooner, right? So like we topped in November last time. This time it was October. Maybe if Bitcoin goes up to the 200-day, it'll happen earlier than it did last cycle. Also, the cycle before that, in 2018, it went back up to the 200-day moving average in April, right? In late April, early May. So yeah, like it's certainly possible that Bitcoin gets a rally back up to the 200-day moving average. But if it does, I think it will be a macro lower high. Like it's not,
Yes.
It's a tactical rally. It's not the start of a new bull market, in my opinion, right? So like, and that's all it would be. So if you are holding Bitcoin and that happens, I think that would actually be a great opportunity to maybe lighten your bag some
I agree.
before we get further out into the summer. There's also no guarantee, right? Like there's no guarantee it happens. And by the way, I mean there always exist scenarios where it does something like this, right? Like where we maybe go below Saylor's cost basis, everyone freaks out, panics, and then you could get the rally back up to the 200-day moving average.
Especially
Like,
now that it's
also
more institutionalized. I think this is a very likely scenario because now it's not just retail. Actually, what you showed the chart is not retail actually that is here, but more institutions trying to fish for retail. I actually made this post and I said every pump in the next 30 to 90 days, that's liquidity. And I think I completely agree with you on that retrace. If that happens, that is a selling opportunity. But the question really is, do you think the probability right now, looking at the market, looking at every factor that you see, do you think it happens, or you rather think we're just going to capitulate, go down 60, 70, and kind of chop for a little bit and then bottom out? Which scenario is more likely in your opinion?
I mean, I think that what you do matters more. So what I've done is I'm not trading that idea. Like I offloaded basically all the Bitcoin I was going to sell back in October, November timeframe. I'm not like I haven't been buying Bitcoin. I haven't been selling any more of it. I'm just in the like right now I'm in the stance of like it's short-term moves are like a random walk. And I studied physics and it's called geometric bounding motion. You cannot know for sure what's going to happen. I don't know if in 2014 Yeah, I guess even in 2014 we had that rally back at the 200-day moving average, but that didn't happen until June, you know? Um, and we didn't fall below it until March. But I mean, the point is like, no one can fully know. For me, it's not something I'm trading, right? Like I'm not a short-term trader. I'm
Yes.
not trying to like scout profits. So for me, what I did was I just kind of got out of Bitcoin back over here in this sort of this area off these highs, and I have just been waiting until like later this summer. More likely than not, October is when I think the low could be. I think October makes a lot of sense in terms of a low. It's 1 year after the bull market started. So that's when I would be a buyer, right? Like I would be a buyer probably Q4 timeframe. By the way, there's an interesting coincidence. I've posted about this. So I don't know if you saw it, but um, the last two bear markets have lasted exactly 1 year, right? November to November and then December to December. But what's interesting is if you look at MicroStrategy, it actually last cycle it took 98 weeks to bottom from February
I actually
2021
have your
until
tweet. I have your tweet up here about that
right.
98 weeks from
Yeah.
cycle October 2026. Exactly what
And
we're after.
exactly October 2026. So I think for me, like I'm just gonna guess that October 2026 has the highest likelihood of being the bottom. That's not when it has to be, but that's just when I would likely be a buyer then, right? But
I
I'm
think
not even though we could go back up to the 200-day, but I'm not betting for that right now.
now
Even though
that's
I
the
think it's a
question. I think
chance to
I
happen.
think that's the question. What happens? What is your invalidation? And I understand I've been studying. I did my homework. So if of course if someone watches your content, they understand invalidation would be a 50-week break above and a couple of weeks close. Would there be any other scenario, or if you extend on this a little bit as well, but would there be any other scenario where you would be like, yes, I think this cycle might actually be different, because we've seen the cycle be a little bit different in a lot of aspects. Of course, it's been same in a lot of aspects as well. Would there be something catalyst where you say, okay, but maybe I'm actually wrong and I should start buying back?
The only thing I've looked at is this pattern here. Like if you see this, you see how Bitcoin put in a slightly higher high, and then it looks like maybe it's going to come sweep this low from April 2025. That's my base case. This pattern we actually saw in other markets as well. So if you go look at Nvidia, you'll see that same exact pattern where you had like a slightly higher high, and then Nvidia then swept the low, and then it went to a new all-time high, right? So
What
like
is the low
like
there on
it
your chart? What is the low there on Bitcoin?
so it'd be like seven, a little below. This is Nvidia. This chart's Nvidia.
No, I understand, but can you go back to Bitcoin and show us
Yeah, it would
what would that
be
mean?
it'd be sweeping going below 74.4K.
Mm-hmm.
So basically it'd be going below Sailor's cost basis. That could be a capitulation
Pre-cut,
low
yeah.
from where, yeah. So I think there's a scenario here where Bitcoin sweeps this low and then rallies. And then the question is going to be, okay, is it going to play out like Nvidia, where it swept the low and then went to a new all-time high? You can also see Google did the exact same thing, right? It had a slightly higher high, it then swept the low and then went to a new all-time high. So we've seen this pattern, but what my guess is going to happen, this is my guess, is that
It's
what
a
I think is going to
dubious
happen
speculation now. It's a dubious
is dubious
speculation
speculation.
now.
Yeah. What I think is going to happen is this. I think Bitcoin is going to sweep this low. I then think it'll rally. And then everyone's going to start talking about the Nvidia pattern and the Google pattern. But I do think it will lead to a macro lower high.
Can
Maybe,
that be the
sometime.
200-day SMA?
It could be, right. That. So if Bitcoin were to sweep this low and then rally, like I might start to get more optimistic about it going to that 200-day moving average. So imagine if it plays out like that. Like put the 200-day on
Exactly. I
here.
agree. And it aligns with
Yeah,
charts as well.
right. So I mean, imagine if Bitcoin were to do something like that, where like it sweeps this low, and then it kind of like comes back up to sort of this resistance level here, and then it ends up aligning more or less with the 200-day moving average, and then everyone FOMOs in at this lower high, and then you get your kind of your big crash going into the summer months. I could totally see it playing out like that.
Now, what is very interesting is that, I love this. The reason why I love it is because you're not, as you say, you're not a charter, so you're not a lower time frame. And I'm in there every day, everyday trading and try, obviously have the investments as well. But if you look at this, the reason why it's super interesting what you're saying is because if I just look at the chart and I say I need to see a daily low below here. So my next target, this is what I'm short as well, the next target down here at sub 80,000. That can be between 75 and 80,000, looking at this massive demand zone down here, right? So there has to be some kind of bounce here. If there is no bounce, it's game over, it's lights out. But there must be some kind of bounce there. And this is your 200-day average, which will come down to this region. So that could very much align just the daily high retrace up to this 94,500 region, and then a complete rejection from there. The question is, whether that's that is what's happening or not. But I think talking about dubious speculation, Ben, you're big on dubious speculation. We're talking about, you say, so I actually had a back in October, I had this full video. I mean, bull market is over, and on there I said 2 trillion is my target on the total market cap. Now that might be a little bit low. We're close to that 40-60% correction. But you're saying that exactly what you explained at the beginning, that the 4-year cycle is intact, and we talked about how the bottom might actually just be in October. Can you see, and also you actually, one of the very interesting things as well is that you also pointed out that the S&P has these 4-year cycles. So it's not just Bitcoin, but we can see this in multiple assets and how that can relate to here. Do you see any reason, again, I really want to get into your head regarding 2026. We can see the $7 trillion sitting in money markets just waiting to be deployed. Rate cuts are going to happen eventually. Money printing will happen eventually. We will see a declarative bill. Now, yesterday was a step forward. There will be regulatory certainty in the United States. We know Trump is pushing, whether it's for real or not, we don't know, 25% of Trump family's wealth is in crypto. So, can you see any scenario where, let's forget about the charts, but where 2026 could actually be bullish and could actually be creating bigger highs or sooner bottom than we actually think?
I mean, I think there's a chance Bitcoin could bottom out as early as the summer. If you look at last cycle, MicroStrategy actually basically bottomed in the summer. I mean, I know technically I said it took 98 weeks, but really the low arguably was in by May. So yeah, I could see a scenario where, I mean, first of all, I could see a scenario where Bitcoin kind of drops and then rallies and then has a big catastrophic drop, and then everyone thinks it's going to continue into October. But maybe it doesn't. Maybe we front run that. That is certainly possible, and that's why I will start to get interested in Bitcoin as early as this summer. Right? I'm not going to wait until October to start to get interested. I think there's a chance that the way things are headed right now, I absolutely think there's a chance that we have good buying opportunities as early as kind of like later on this summer. For an invalidation, I guess if Bitcoin were to sweep the low and sort of the invalidation is right, getting back above the 50-week moving average on some weekly closes, then I might be forced to pivot. But I also think that would be a very hard thing to buy into. Imagine, if Bitcoin is at new all-time highs in late 2026, it doesn't really present the same buying opportunity that it would have presented in all the other midterm years. So I would be concerned more so about the long-term health of the market at that point. And whether, I don't even know if I could be a buyer in that scenario.
No, that's a question.
I have about 25% of my original Bitcoin stack right now. So, if it does go to new all-time highs, I might even get tempted to just sell that. Normally I just hold, 20 to 30% of my Bitcoin through the midterm years, just in case I'm wrong. But I almost think if that were to happen, then I'd be more likely to sell the remainder of my stack than I would be to go buy more.
It's so sad. I think sad, but it's true.
I know what I'd like to happen is I'd like to just have a bear market, where you get pretty good entries at the end of the midterm year, just like we had the end of 2014, 2018, and 2022. That would be ideal to me.
Also, if I just look at 2018 and especially Trump's midterm, it wasn't really great for those of us who've been here. I wanted to, when I mentioned for a second that it's sad, I don't really mean it's sad, but if you look at this, you had a post the other day that really made me think about this whole crypto situation. First of all, you said, don't be afraid to pivot. And then I've been saying the same thing, alt season, people have been calling for alt season forever, complete craziness, not reading the room, not realizing what's happening. And then you had this post, I think like 2 days ago. I did not turn my back on altcoin market. The altcoin turned back on me when it became nothing more than useless meme coin slop. Do you see, it actually hit home, I think for a lot of people, but do you see a world where regulatory framework in the US, complete capitulation across the board, because that's what we see now in altcoins, that innovation comes back and crypto becomes what it was back in the days?
Yeah, I think it could happen, but I think the best way for us to get there would be for this year to be a bear market, where you have all this great news, but for some reason price just keeps going down. So what normally happens, this happened in 2019 as well, alts first bleed against Bitcoin, right? They bleed against Bitcoin. Altcoins have been bleeding against Bitcoin for years. After they bleed against Bitcoin, then they bleed against the US dollar, even if they go up against Bitcoin, right? And some of them have done that, where they're going down on their USD pairs, but they're being dragged down because now Bitcoin is going down, right? Like now Bitcoin is in a bear market. So you could have some altcoins going up on their Bitcoin pairs, but down on their USD pairs. What I'd like to see to get bullish on the altcoin market, I'd like to see this year be a bear market for Bitcoin. If it is, and Bitcoin drops, 50% from the highs or 70% from the highs or whatever, I might start to get more bullish on the altcoin market.
Do you see that happening with all this institutionalization, these governments buying these? Like, do you think that another 70% drop from the highs, that would be like what, 40,000 Bitcoin? Is that a possibility?
I think a 50% drop from the highs is certainly possible, like to get us back
about 60.
maybe around. Yeah, I mean, I think so. In 2019, which is what I think this is the most similar to, if you exclude the pandemic, Bitcoin dropped about 53%.
Yes.
So I think about a 50% drop from the highs makes sense. I have a really interesting chart. I think you might like it actually. It's the number of days since Bitcoin. How many days has Bitcoin gone since it had a 50% drop from the highs? It is now on almost 1,200 days. The only other time in history it reached these levels was back in 2018, also a midterm year where we had the same president in the office, right? I mean, there's just some similarities here.
Hey?
I think give me that 50% drop from the highs on Bitcoin, and I don't think I would be as deterministically bearish. Like if Bitcoin's back at 60K, then I might have, or 60 to 70, I might start to pivot my views. But yeah, for now, I think we need to see this chart reset, right? I think a nice 50% drop from the highs is what we need. And I think that would go a long way in cleansing out a lot of the useless garbage in the altcoin market. I think one of the issues that we've had is there's just been a lot of malinvestment of capital into projects that don't deserve any capital, right? Like meme coins that go to zero, keep getting all the money, and any projects that try to do anything, no one cares about them because they'd rather just go buy meme coins. So we need to see that transition, and I think that transition is underway.
I agree. And it's actually very nice to see. Again, this post of yours hit home because of this, because I saw the same thing. There's so many cool stuff that we could do with blockchain and crypto and all that, but it just became, but also I think influencers or KOLs or thought leaders like us have the responsibility in this, because I also think that the industry became vastly what it became because who is driving and what people actually do in this space. So, but wanted to show you this here. I do believe whatever, I'm actually very much aligned with what you're saying. I do believe that this down here about 60,000 is absolutely possible. Wicking out this weekly low of 73, getting into the 60s, so 68, 5, 8, 9, whatever that might be, is not even a stretch, especially if we can see a little bit of a bullishness here. Everybody will scream we're back, and there's the same playbook on the lower time frames that we flush. I wanted to talk about one more thing, which is super important. And that is that you're talking about metals, and as you said as well, you've been openly pivoting to commodities and talking about, there's always a bull market somewhere, and you just got to focus at the right place. Now I'm also the believer that the fact if metals top, that is not going to be the bottom necessarily for crypto, as everybody is saying. But what is more interesting that got my attention is that you said metals will likely have a big correction later this year, but when they do, crypto will likely drop more. Now, if we look at gold down 12% in the past, 2 days. Silver down 21%. And Bitcoin is down 10%. So all the narrative of, Bitcoin is bottoming, whatever. Is this the metal correction that you're waiting for? Or this is nothing close to what you're talking about?
It could be. I mean, I think, if you go back and look at all the metal corrections, going back to the 1980s, they usually top between January and May. So I think silver, there's a higher likelihood that gold can go to a new all-time high than silver at this point. That doesn't mean that silver can't go to an all-time high, but I think, like, if you look at the gold-silver ratio, like, look at this ratio right here. This is the time, like, where this ratio just hit. This is sort of the point where I think gold might become a better risk reward than silver in the short term. I have no idea exactly where the top is going to be. Could the top already be in for silver? Absolutely, right? It could be in. But if you go look at like the year-to-date ROI of silver and gold, I'm going to show you something because this is really interesting. Look at the year-to-date ROI of gold, and if we look at it, look at 2026, now look at 2022, and then look at 2018. What you'll see is that gold's weakest moment in midterm years tends to be late Q3, early Q4, right? Late Q3, early Q4, which is also likely when Bitcoin bottoms. So what I'm saying is that if people are waiting for metals to top for Bitcoin to bottom, I think they're going to be mistaken. What I think would be better is to assume that when gold bottoms, maybe that's when Bitcoin bottoms. The problem is that gold, I mean, maybe it has topped, I don't know. But the problem is, like, at least as of a couple of days ago when gold was putting in new all-time highs, gold hasn't even started going down yet. So it's hard to call for a bottom on Bitcoin, like a durable long-term bottom, when gold continues to go up. Because I think that the low for gold might correspond to the low for Bitcoin. And I don't even know if gold has topped yet. I mean, this has been a crazy rally for gold. I do, like, if the top for gold is in, I don't think it will be the macro top. There's a lot of examples in history where silver tops earlier and then gold tops later. Like in 1974, silver topped in February, and then I think gold topped in like December. And then there's other examples as well where gold continues to stay strong even after the high for silver is in. So as silver has gone through this parabolic rally, I mean, I think kind of between months of January to May is the time to take some silver profits over to gold, and then that gold kind of gives you exposure to the potential upside. Doesn't mean gold can't go down. Obviously it can, but I just think it becomes a better risk reward play. So what I would be looking for potential confluence for a Bitcoin low would be maybe some type of big drop by gold where a low forms kind of like late Q3, early Q4 timeframe.
Ben, any final thoughts for 2026? Anything that you think every investor, hodler, or community member should know?
Yeah, I mean, I think the point is like, you know, midterm years kind of suck a lot of times. Like, they're not really that much fun. But if you think about it, like, the people who made the most money from 2023 to 2025 are the people that stuck around through the last bear market in 2022. So you could argue that the bear markets are actually where all the money is made. You just don't know it yet, right? Like, all the money in 2025 was made from the people who bought it in like 2022, 2023. My guess is that people who make a lot of money maybe out in like 2028 are the people that stuck around in 2026 and actually bought as prices got lower. So just remember that bull markets make you money, bear markets make you rich over the long term.
So crypto is not dead, Bitcoin is not going to zero, and this is not the end of the world. It's just a period. Is that, do I read that correctly?
Yeah, I don't think Bitcoin's going to zero, but I do think it's in a bear market. And I think later this year, there's going to be a lot more fear than there is right now. And I think that'll be a great time to buy.
Ben, I truly appreciate you. If anyone wants to follow you, we're going to leave all the links in the description to Into the Cryptoverse and also your YouTube channel. Truly appreciate you being here. And I hope to get you back anytime soon.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Take care. Guys, thanks for watching. If you're interested in more in-depth TA technical analysis and actionable trades every single day, that is what I do on this channel. This is the daily update, 5 to 10 minutes every single day. All the trades I do, all the trades I take are on here. Subscribe to the channel, join the community, link in the description, and come back every single day. I'll see you in the next one.